Junior Achievement of Greater Cleveland and Citizens Bank presents JA Personal Finance, Session 3, Saving.
That light won't always show the truth. I know sometimes it hurts to hear it. Miracles happen when you don't let nothing hurt your spirit. I've been bringing birth to lyrics before my first appearance. The fact that I'm still here is a product of perseverance. I'm not the same as any other artist. Don't compare us. I'm the loudest, the clearest, the proudest, the nearest to a track record that's flawless. Minus the smoke and mirrors. I'm too careful to be careless. I'm out here close to fearless. How I made it, I played it safe until I elevated. Now that weight has been my saving grace. I'ma celebrate it. It's the long-awaited opening ceremony for the greatest, getting stronger daily focus. And the only way to say this,
Hello, my name is Wendy Cahill, and I am the branch manager at the Westland branch in Westland, Michigan. I am excited to come to you today to talk to you about saving. You know, as you can see from the chart, the sooner you start saving, the sooner and the more money you'll have for retirement. You just cannot beat compounding interest. Now, I started saving way back on my first job. My mom taught me I should give 10% to charity, should save 10% to pay myself, and then whatever else I wanted to do, I had to live on the 80%. So, as you can imagine, being my first job, I found many of other things to do with my money other than save. And so I found myself in a position where I had to figure out what I could stop doing in order to save money. For example, I love going out to eat at fast food places. So I realized if I just stopped doing fast food one time a week, that would give me $10 or $20 that I could put in my savings account. So my challenge to you would be, what can you do in order to start saving? What would you be willing to give up, to sacrifice? Some of you may be coffee drinkers. Whatever it is that you can decide you're going to sacrifice to save, I promise you, in the end, it will be worth it. So, I ask you today, many people tell me, Wendy, I can't afford to save. And you know what I tell them? You can't afford not to save. In the midst of a pandemic, I can't tell you how many people need that emergency fund to help get them through the tough times. The sooner I can get you saving right now, as soon as you enter the workforce, it will become a habit. And as a habit, you won't feel comfortable. And believe it or not, the older you get, it seems like the more money you will want to save. the things that you used to want to buy won't be so important to you. So I am so excited, and I look forward to being with you on this venture to see how we can get you saving more money. Have a great day.
My name is Joe Parente, and I'm a Citizens banker out of the University Heights branch location. And I've been at Citizens for 4 years now. And in my 4 years, I've been able to build a lot of long-lasting relationships and help a lot of different clientele meet their financial goals, whether it be short-term or long-term. But one thing that comes up over time and time again is savings accounts and how to properly save for the future. With savings, it's very important to get that started as soon as possible. So if you don't have a savings in place today, I would highly recommend that you get something started in place as soon as you can. Whether you're working part-time or full-time or going to school and just working here and there, it's something you should always do is put money aside. The top things to save for would be emergency fund or some long-term purchase that you need to make or want to make in the future. And then also, if you don't have a purchase that you're needing to make right away, it's good to have something set aside to build on your wealth for the long term. It's never too early to start that. When I first started working at my part-time job, I started saving at least 10% of my income before tax and move it over into a savings account. And I had no set in mind of what I was going to use that savings for. I just wanted to accumulate as much as I could. So if you can do more than 10%, that's fantastic. Do as much as you can. One thing that I'm so grateful for of putting a savings account in place was being able to purchase my first home 3 years ago. That's one of my biggest accomplishments to this day. And I wouldn't have been able to buy my first home without a great savings in place. With that savings account, it led me to be able to put a down payment on the home, move in, and feel secure. One thing that savings is meant to do is protect you from any emergencies or things that come up that you just weren't expecting. So now, it's a little peace of mind that I can have because I have a proper savings in place. So if something were to come up, which owning a home happens a lot, there's a lot of unexpected expenses, and because I have that savings, I know that if something were to arise, I have something in place. But then my other main focus, my retirement down the line, because, the more I put in now, it's going to be even better in the long term. Again, my name is Joe Parente, and I work out of the University Heights branch location, Citizens Bank. So if you are ever in that area and you want to stop into a Citizens Bank location, feel free to stop in there and ask me anything you want or need. I'm happy to help you, and you have a great rest of your day. Thank you for listening.
Hi again, it's Nadeta Ledson from Citizens Bank. As you've gathered, this session is all about savings. So Wendy and Joe explained that people often save to be able to buy something they really want. And can you figure out what 3 things most teens spend their money on? Well, let's give it a try together. Let's match each description to the category on the chart. First description, basic needs, electronics, cars, other things. Which category do you think it is? Do you think they spend 43%, 48%, or 19% of their income? Let's see. 43. You're right. Teens spend the majority of their money on basic needs. How about social? Things like food, video games, music, movies, events. What do you think? 19, 38% of their income? No, not the second most. How about the least? Yeah, so teens spend less on social needs than they do any other category. And clothing, accessories, and personal care. So teens spend the second most amount on personal items. So let me ask you this. Are you surprised by what teens spend their money on? Well, do teens spend more money on wants or needs? Yeah, I know, right? So while basic clothing, foods, or needs, expensive or excessive clothing, like eating out and social expenses, are wants. Let me ask you this. Do you think that you'll spend your money on the same things 5 years from now? Will you still spend more money on clothes and personal items than anything else? Remember, Wendy talked about this when she was sharing her story. Well, we'd like for you to think about this. Recognize that after you graduate from high school, you'll likely spend your money a little differently. You might have other expenses like rent, insurance, continuing your education, other things that you may want to spend your money on. Have you ever tried to spend less so that you could save money? How did you go about doing that? How did you try to save? Recall, Joe talked about setting up a savings account and paying himself first. Remember that? His strategy was to slide 10% of each check to a savings account. That's how he's gone about trying to save. What do you think teens might try to save money for? What are some of the things you might want to save your money for? A car? Okay. Perhaps college? Okay. Clothes? Shoes? Maybe expensive clothes, expensive shoes? Okay. Well, remember, Joe also talked about a time when he was beginning to save for a big purchase. Remember that? And that how he was glad that once he saved for that big purchase, he saved a little bit more just in case some emergencies arise. Right. So Joe talked about setting up his savings account to plan for something in the future. And about 3 years ago, his big purchase was to buy a home. And he said that he not only saved enough for the down payment to move in, but also to be secure because things come up. Unexpected things always happen. And having a little money saved, or a lot of money saved, can really help you in a pinch in case of an emergency. So how about wants versus needs? So wants are unlimited, right? But income is limited. So if you buy everything you want, you won't have enough money left over for the things you need, right? So let's talk about the objectives for today's session. After today's session, there are 4 things you'll be able to do. First, you'll be able to recognize reasons for savings. Then you will be able to explain how savings can help you earn interest instead of paying interest. Wendy talked about that a little bit. You'll also be able to use strategies to achieve a savings goal, as well as to recognize unhealthy relationship behaviors related to saving. So let's go over a couple key terms. Saving and interest. Help me define these. What is saving? All right, so saving is setting aside a portion of current income for future use. And how about interest? Recall, Wendy spoke about interest. Interest is payment for the use of money, a fee paid to use someone else's money or money earned from following or from allowing someone else to use your money. Earning and savings are truly the basis for how you get what you want and need. And saving can help you earn interest instead of paying interest. And without savings, people often choose to borrow to pay for their wants or even their needs. And if they borrow money, they pay interest to someone else instead of being paid interest on, say, for instance, a savings account, like they would if they had planned and saved. So you might ask, well, so what does interest have to do with savings, Nadeta? So if you put your money into a savings account, the bank, like Citizens Bank or other banks, will pay you interest. And if you don't save money and you have to borrow to pay for unexpected expenses, then you'll have to pay interest on the loan. Now, we'll talk more about debt later in the series.
If you had an emergency and needed to come up with $400 right now, could you do it? Shockingly, nearly half of Americans said they couldn't, which is another way of saying that nearly half of Americans have no financial flexibility or freedom.
While it might not be the flashiest or most exciting financial goal, an emergency fund is the foundation your entire financial health is built upon. Without it, it's just a matter of time before an unexpected jolt causes a crack that will eventually bring the whole house down.
We recently asked you, our amazing 2 Cents community, to share your real life stories about how an emergency fund, or lack thereof, has impacted your lives, and you really came through.
So let's learn from each other what not having savings is truly costing you and pick up some tips for finally making it a reality. Rose and her husband were in the military making decent money as she finished up college. Unfortunately, they didn't see any real need to save any of it. So the day Rose was supposed to leave for a study abroad program, her husband totals their new car on the way to the airport, rendering them both carless and cashless.
So what if you found yourself in a similar situation? How much money could you save by having a proper emergency fund if your car decides to kick the bucket? I think it's time to
Run the numbers.
Let's assume you are, for lack of a better word, average. Most people, when buying a car, buy used with an average purchase price of $20,084.
You've also got the average American credit score of 673 and want the most common car loan length of 72 months. Running this scenario through a big-named bank gave me an APR estimate of 7.94%. That means you'd be potentially paying a gobsmacking $5,000 in interest alone over the lifetime of that loan.
If you or they had had even a little bit of an emergency fund, you could have potentially afforded a shorter loan term, gotten a better interest rate, or maybe even skipped out on interest altogether and just bought a cheaper car in cash, all of which could have saved you hundreds, if not thousands of dollars.
Another common unexpected expense you guys talked about were house repairs. Poor Brianna and her husband woke up on one of the coldest days in winter with flames shooting from the back of their furnace. Thankfully, they had $3,500 in savings to keep frostbite at bay, but what if they had approached it like most people would and put those repairs on a credit card?
Treating your credit cards like an emergency fund is like trying to use one of those weighted workout vests as a life jacket. With the average current credit card interest rate at 19.24%, financing a vital repair like that could have cost them an extra $673, even if they managed to pay it off in 1 year. That number could have easily climbed into the thousands if they stretched it out over a few years.
But the lack of an emergency fund can cost you more than money. After a year of battling an illness, one of our YouTube community members, Almost Lindsay, ended up needing an emergency surgery. Thankfully, she had decent health insurance, so it shouldn't have been a big deal. The problem was she'd already used up her sick leave at work, so the time she'd be spending in the hospital would also be no paycheck time.
Without emergency savings and no access to credit because of her lack of income, she was forced to beg friends and family to help her cover her basics like rent and food until she could get back to work. She recalled the whole situation being both stressful and humiliating and has worked hard to save up a cash cushion in the time since.
Then there's Ashley, who said having an emergency fund may have saved her life. She had a suspicion that she might be suffering from sleep apnea, but quickly learned that the testing and equipment involved wouldn't come cheap. She said that having her emergency fund gave her the confidence to schedule an appointment with her doctor. And thank goodness she did. Turns out tests showed her hunch was correct, and the lack of oxygen during sleep had been significantly taxing her heart. Thankfully, she told us after a 6-month treatment, she's doing much better.
Now, I'm sure you're thinking, I get it, Philip and Julia, I need an emergency fund, but how do I get one?
Here are our favorite 3 tips to start laying down your financial foundation the right way. Tip 1, pick a specific number. Most experts agree that a fully funded emergency fund should have between 3 and 6 months of expenses. This number isn't just based on bills and rent, but also flexible expenses like groceries, medications, and transportation. That is typically enough to pay deductibles on your health or auto insurance, and could also potentially handle a major transition like a sudden move or a critical home repair.
Tip 2, get organized. Now that you have a savings target in mind, set your money for this goal apart in some way. If your savings for emergencies, a new phone, and your brother's bachelor party are smashed together in a general savings bucket, you're sabotaging yourself. Get clear on what money is for true emergencies and give it a special home.
Tip 3, sprint. Sometimes to get something you've never had, you'll have to do something you've never done. Try challenging yourself to a spending freeze. Cut back on every non-essential expense and hustle for any extra income you can for just 1 month. Seriously, cancel all your subscriptions, tell your friends you're sorry you can't go see the new Marvel movie, and read comics at the library instead. Remember, it's just for 30 days. See how far you can get towards your goal. Then, maybe take a week or 2 break to catch your breath, go out for a nice meal or 2, then hit it hard again until you're done.
Now, congrats for making it all the way to the end of the video, because we're going to share a powerful little secret with you. Saving up for an emergency fund requires you to be intentional, focused, and to live below your means, which are the exact same financial muscles it takes to ultimately build wealth.
So when you're finally done with this goal, awesome! Take those mad money muscles you just earned and use them to build something amazing on top of the foundation you just laid down.
And that's our 2 cents.
So I really like that video. Why you need an emergency fund. You know, an emergency fund is a savings for unexpected expenses, unplanned expenses. And so it's really not the same as saving up for a large purchase, like a new to you used car. Savings is all about being intentional, right? So saving over a longer period of time allows people to plan for large expenses or large purchases and to be prepared for emergencies. So how much should you save for an emergency fund? You remember what our friends in the video said? That's right, 3 to 6 months. No matter what your lifestyle is, you'll want to save at least 3 to 6 months to cover your essential expenses. How about this? What should you use an emergency fund for? How about unexpected events like healthcare costs or, repairs to your home or a car? I've saved an emergency fund. Actually, a couple weeks from now, I'll be rebuilding my front steps. I didn't expect that to happen. How about unexpected job loss? We're in a global pandemic, and here in the US, a lot of people have lost their jobs because of the economic crisis that's ensued. This may be an example of something that your families may be experiencing and have used your emergency fund for, or needed an emergency fund for. How can having an emergency fund save you money? That's right, you can earn interest on your savings. You won't have to need to get a loan to pay for unexpected expenses, which can actually cost you more. Now let's quickly review these saving strategies. There are 4 of them. The first is setting a savings goal. 10 to 15% of your income is a good goal. Second, pay yourself first. Set aside money for saving prior to paying monthly expenses. How about cutting back on non-essential expenses? Number 3. Non-expensive or non-essential expenses like expensive clothing, shoes, eating out at a fast food restaurant 5 days a week. Non-essential expenses like that. And 4th, consider adding income. Look for some ways to increase your earnings. Perhaps that's picking up babysitting gigs, or a few more hours at your part-time job, or even getting a part-time job. You may recall earlier on I mentioned that wants are unlimited, but income is limited. And people who try to save the money they have left after paying for what they need, like their bills, often are not able to save because they have paid for everything they need, then buy what they want until their paycheck is gone. Okay, let's try this exercise. Pick a plan. First, we're going to identify the best plan for reaching the savings goal. And then we're going to learn about which plan is best and why. Ready? Let's give it a try. So the first goal, save $200 in 3 months for prom tickets. Which savings plan is the best one? Plan A is save $20 every week until you reach your goal. Plan B is save your leftover money at the end of each month until you reach your goal. A or B? What do you think? Let's try this one. B. Well, try again. If you rely on saving leftover spending money, the amount you save will be unpredictable. Well, Plan B is not the best option. Let's see why Plan A is the best option. Plan A is best. Automatically setting aside $20 per week will allow you to reach your goal in 10 weeks. 10 times 20, $200. You can predict that. All right, let's try this next goal. The goal is save $400 for a new gaming system as quickly as possible. Which plan is the best one? A or B? Okay, let's see here. Plan A, save half of the $30 you make each week babysitting and supplement that with money you can save by packing your lunch instead of buying it. Plan B, try to spend less of the $30 you make each week babysitting and save whatever you left at the end of the month. Save the money you have left over, or plan ahead and set some money aside out of each week? A or B? You're right. Let's try A. Plan A is the best. Remember, pay yourself first, and spending less can help you save money faster. Let's see why B isn't the right choice. If you don't pay yourself first, you are always likely to spend everything you make rather than saving it. Let's try another one. This goal. You want to buy a new sofa for $600 as soon as possible. Which plan is the best savings plan? Plan A, setting up a savings plan to set aside $50 a month to pay for the sofa. Or Plan B, buy the sofa now using store credit, which offers 0% financing for 6 months. All right, so pay interest or 0 interest for 6 months. Essentially take out a loan for a special offer at 0% for 6 months. Or plan ahead and set aside $50 per month. A or B, which one do you think? I agree. Plan A. Plan A is the safest. You won't have to borrow money to get the sofa, but it will take you a year to save enough. How important is it to get that sofa now? Well, these are things you have to consider. Let's see why B may not be the best choice. Usually borrowing to buy something isn't the best bet. Using credit offer or a credit offer like this could be an option if you're really confident that you can pay for the sofa in less than 6 months. However, no one can predict the future and your financial situation may change. If you can't pay the sofa off in 6 months, you're really risking getting charged a very high interest rate. Let's try this one. You and your friend or your spouse want to save $1,000 for a big vacation next year. Which savings plan is the best one? A or B? Well, let's read. Plan A says since the vacation isn't an essential expense, you want to pay your other expenses first and save what's left, even if it means waiting a little longer to take the vacation. B says your spouse wants to set aside $100 a month in savings, in a savings account for the vacation. So A is talking about saving what you have left over, and Plan B is talking about planning ahead and setting aside $100 or some funds in a savings account towards the things you want. Let's see. Is B the right one? Paying yourself first is the best strategy for saving, but since this is a joint decision, both people need to be comfortable and agree on the best approach. This is true. Let's see what Plan A says. If you really want to take a vacation, then paying yourself first is the best way to save. However, since this is a joint decision with your friend or spouse, the two of you need to have a conversation about your priorities. So essentially with this one, you need to have a healthy conversation about your finances with your mate, your friend, about how you plan to save together, to save for the things you want. Okay, let's go over this scenario together in exercise. Max out. Max has a problem. He just graduated from high school and is new to living on his own. Every month he is spending more in expenses than he is earning in income. Max also wants to start saving money for an emergency fund. He makes $12 an hour at his job. After taxes and other required deductions, he takes home $1,350 a month to cover expenses. Our challenge is to help Max adjust his spending so that he can begin to save. So let's take out our student activity sheet called Maxed Out and go through this activity. So essentially, Max is making or spending more than he makes. He needs to start saving for his emergency fund. So first, we'll need to decide on the amount to set aside for savings. You must set aside $135 each month, or 10% of Max's income, his monthly income, which is $1,350. But saving more would be even better. Next, you'll need to decide which expenses to adjust to meet the savings goal. Now, for each expense you change, note what Max can do to save money. Perhaps eliminate one subscription service, maybe even sell his car and get a cheaper one, or a more fuel-efficient used car, or even perhaps cutting his eating out expenses in half. Now, I'd like for you to pause the video for about 10 minutes and review all of these expenses that Max has and decide which ones to reduce or eliminate or adjust, and get a new amount and the explanation of what you did. Feel free to pause the video. And let's regroup again in about 5 to 10 minutes. Let's help Max get started saving for his emergency fund. So, rule of thumb, set aside 3 to 6 months of your take home in order to establish an emergency fund. So in Max's case, Max's take home is $1,350 each month. He set that amount aside to establish emergency fund. Over time, he would earn or save $4,050. Max wants to set aside 10% of his monthly earnings. So that's $135 each month. Max's emergency fund goal could be reached in 30 months if he did that, or in 2.5 years. However, if Max could figure out a way to save more each month, say $220, he could shave a year off the time it will take for him to establish or reach his goal. So, how did you decide which expenses to cut for Max? Everyone's priorities are different, so there's really no one way to decide. You know, some people may have looked for expenses that don't seem essential, or they may have looked for expenses that are very high and tried to reduce them. I know I did when I looked at Max's budget. Do you think that the budget you made for Max is realistic for him to follow for an extended period of time? Now, think of this. Making some drastic cuts like not allowing for dining out or entertainment, it really isn't realistic over a long term, right? So we looked at the earlier calculation of, if Max saved $135 a month, or 10% of his take-home income, it would take him 2.5 years to establish his target goal amount for his emergency fund. That's a long time, and it could be pretty difficult for him to achieve his goal by making those drastic cuts over that period of time. All right, so don't want to cut out all the fun stuff. That could be rough. Do you think that you can adjust your own spending like you did for Max? Starting a savings plan and trying to stick to it, it takes some practice. But like Wendy said earlier, it can become a habit, right? So over time, saving, paying yourself first, reducing your expenses, living within your means is habit forming, and it can become better with time. So I took a look at Max's budget as well, And I actually thought, saving $135 a month to help him reach his goal could probably be accelerated just a little bit if he saved a little bit more. So I'm suggesting that Max starts off with, say, about 13% of his take-home pay, saving that a month. And perhaps over time he can increase that. We'll certainly cut down the length of time he would need to save to establish the goal. I also looked at some of his other expenses. For instance, his car insurance. Perhaps we could help Max find a better rate, right? And say $5 per month. I'm also suggesting that Max thinks about eating out less or much less, from the tune of $180 a month to $40 a month, and slightly increasing his grocery bills so that he can eat home more. Just for a period of time, I'm suggesting that Max eliminate his subscriptions. All right? But I'm not really suggesting that he eliminates his entertainment, just the entertainment budget, like going out to the movies and maybe gaming and electronics. And perhaps he can increase his internet service package. Instead of doing entertainment out, perhaps he could do that at home. And if that's too much, well, maybe we could revisit that with him. In all, instead of Max spending $42 more a month than he earns, he's actually underspending at $1,300 a month, or $1,337, $13 less. Now one could say, well, if he has $13, perhaps he could throw that towards his savings. That's a choice. That's a potential option. Or maybe every now and then he throws it to entertainment. All right? And that would bring Max even. He would break even. All while saving $180 a month. Not quite 1.5 years, but definitely far less than 2.5 years. Characteristics of a healthy relationship, or healthy relationships. Let's learn a few more terms. How about respect? You value one another's beliefs and opinions, and kindness. You're caring and empathetic towards one another. And how about fun? You enjoy spending time together and bring out the best in each other. So let's look at these 3 scenarios. And since we aren't together, let's approach them a little bit differently than the instructions. So for each one of these scenarios, I'd like for you to identify the red flag, the unhealthy behavior, and let's propose a possible solution for each. All right? So scenario number 1, Max is trying really hard to stay on his budget and build up his savings. Max's best friend doesn't have the same budgeting concerns, and he gets upset with Max because he can't do the things that he wants to do because of their cost. He often pressures Max to do things that he can't afford, and it's making Max uncomfortable. So the red flag here is, well, Max's friend is pressuring him. That's not cool. And an unhealthy behavior in all of this is that he's not being kind. So the solution possibly could be, Max should have a conversation with his friend and let him know how he feels, that he feels pressured, and that he doesn't feel as if his approach is being kind towards him. And he'd like to suggest that, because he enjoys having fun with him, that perhaps they can find things to do that are fun that doesn't cost as much. Or, in fact, perhaps they can find fun things to do together that are absolutely free. How about that? Let's move on to scenario 2. Several months have gone by and Max has managed to build up some savings in his emergency fund. Kudos to Max. Max's brother has a boot on his car because he has outstanding unpaid parking tickets and he needs $400 to pay off the tickets and get the boot removed. He asks Max to lend him the money because he knows Max has the savings. He tells Max that if he doesn't lend him the money, he isn't a good brother. So what's the red flag there? Well, he certainly isn't being respectful to Max, right? And what he said to him isn't kind at all. So Max should have a conversation with him and let him know just that. That he would appreciate him not pressuring him, that he's being unkind, and he'd like for him to interact with him with a bit more respect. And, maybe if Max so choose to help him with some of the cost, perhaps he could do that. But it's totally up to Max. What do you think about that? All right, well, let's move on to scenario number 3. Before Max started saving money, he had an unexpected car repair that he couldn't afford. His roommate offered to pay for the repair and told Max that he didn't need to pay him back because Max sometimes gave him rides. However, now Max's roommate continues to bring up the topic, saying things like, well, you should do this for me because I helped you with the car repair, So what's the red flag? Max's friend is pressuring him, right? He's not being respectful towards him. He certainly isn't being kind. I mean, after all, he told Max that he didn't have to pay him back. So what's a possible solution? Max should have a conversation with him, letting him know that he's making him feel uncomfortable, and to acknowledge that what he did for him was kind and that he appreciated it, but he did not expect that he would have to pay him back because he said that he did not have to. So let's wrap up this section. So bottom line, trust your gut. If it feels like something is off, if you feel it, it probably is. It at least warrants a conversation with another person for further discussion. And perhaps that person is a friend, a family member, or a trusted adult, including a school counselor or a local advocate. Now, if you recognize multiple unhealthy behaviors in your relationship that creates a pattern over time, that is indeed a red flag. Every relationship has its conflicts, but the way people work through those conflicts really determines whether the relationship is healthy or unhealthy. And lastly, if a person constantly feels belittled or has to walk on eggshells around another person, then those are signs that something is really off in that relationship, and that person should seek professional help. Now let's go over some of the things we learned during today's session. Well, the first thing, savings can help you prepare for planned as well as unexpected expenses. Savings can help you earn interest instead of paying interest. And paying yourself first is the best saving strategy. And then last but not least, your saving decisions can affect the people you have relationships with. So congratulations, you just completed session number 3. See you next week.